Hello everyone and welcome to OTT Question Time. My name is Koza Kanji. I'm the editor of VOD Professional. This week we are doing part 2 of a session on building an OTT service from scratch. Last time, ostensibly, we talked about the back end, about content management systems, about legacy, and about first principles. This time around, we're going to be focusing on front end, and joining me to talk about this are, if we can start with you, Jeroen.
Hey, yeah, Jeroen Wijering or Jeroen Wijering in Dutch, but I won't do that to you, Koza. It's always hard to pronounce. So head of product at JW Player, a video company, and we run a video platform for publishers and broadcasters. So with people that publish video on their website with our tools, as well as people that build OTT apps or OTT services with our tools. Been in video since let's see, the first version of the JW Player. There was 04, 05, so 15 years or so by now. In the middle between technology and between product and engineering. So sometimes I'm in more product leaning roles, sometimes more engineering leaning roles. That's kind of, I like that balance.
Great, thank you very much, Jeroen. Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Williams, CEO at Osmodern, and we've been running about 15 years and specialising in designing video experiences or video-centric experiences, and we have services side to our business, which is a lot of kind of user experience design, product strategy, but also build and delivery. And then we also have a product side to our business, which is a headless content management system designed specifically for video experiences that are non-standard, I would say. So yeah, that's my background personally is user experience and design, which I did for agencies and also the BBC, working on video type experiences before I set up Osmodern.
Tom, were you one of the many people that designed iPlayer?
Yeah, one of the 50,000 people who can say I designed iPlayer. I left the BBC before iPlayer appeared, but I was involved in broadband always on experiences to deliver programs, testing in Kingston in Hull before iPlayer materialised. So Tim Bleasdale, our creative director, worked on the first iteration of iPlayer, which was not called iPlayer, but he was involved in that.
Right, okay. Thanks, Tom. And finally, Ariana.
Thank you. It's Ariana here from Varnish Software. Varnish Software is the company that provides software solutions specific to web and API acceleration, video streaming, which will be, I assume, the topic for today, and also content delivery network. We started out about 10 years ago when the market was completely different from nowadays. And today we mostly focus on video, OTT, and content delivery network. My background is pretty much technical. So today I'm here as a technology evangelist, but throughout the years I had the chance to work with different customers, prospects, companies willing to build their own streaming solution and willing to improve content delivery solution. And sometimes we had to start from absolutely zero, which is today's topic. And I really hope to be able to share some inputs which may be helpful to some of you.
Well, hopefully to everybody. Yeah, thank you very much, Ariana.
Thank you.
As I said, last time we talked ostensibly about the back end, and this time we're moving to front end. It's not necessarily always sort of an easily demarcated line, but one thing that absolutely is on the front end is UI and UX. So let's start with that, actually. Tom, in your experience of building OTT services, how has UI UX changed over the last, let's say, 5 years? What are we doing, or what should new OTT service providers be thinking about differently now than a few years back?
I think the change has been pretty significant, I would say, between what we were doing 5 years ago and the kind of problems that we're dealing with now. I think there was a period where, firstly, device proliferation had a massive impact on the kind of UI UX, mainly to do with kind of budgets and achievability of getting onto lots of platforms. That was a defining factor for, and I think what that drove was a kind of, I want to be like Netflix kind of phase, where pretty much every customer we talked to was trying to be like Netflix, and you know, that during that period, I think what we tended to get was RFPs and sort of briefs through the door, where people had kind of listed out a shopping list of features that they'd seen other you know, people in the space had, and they'd kind of go, right, I want this shopping list because I need to be, you know, the same as everyone else in the market, and you know, up to the standard that they are. I think what we've seen probably in the last 2 years is a lot more intelligence around the specific value proposition that customers need. So people, I think, largely are onto their second or third iteration of their platform by now, and during that period they've understood a lot more about what devices they should be on, who their users are and what their users want, why their content or their business model and their business and their workflows are different from other people. And what that enables them to do is be a lot more specific about what is worth spending money on and what is not worth spending money on. So rather than trying to get all the features out of the box for you know, and basically lining up suppliers and saying who can do all of this, and it's whoever can tick the most I can do that on their RFP list. Actually, I think people are much more intelligent now about saying, you know what, all of this is unnecessary for us. What we really need is this. And that means that actually the understanding of what user experience is has become different. So I think, you know, 5 years ago, people might have thought about user experience as being all about UI and features and stuff like that. I think now people understand a lot more about that you know, user experience can mean more than that. It means, you know, curation and language and the way that, you know, the way that you engage people commercially. Those things have become the areas where I think people understand that marginal gains can be made that are very specific to that client and their customers, which you know is a good place to be, because people are actually making intelligent, smart decisions about what they do with their UX rather than just trying to copy each other.
Right, yeah. Jeroen, from your perspective, I mean, your company is called JW Player. Yeah, the player, I guess, is the integral part to the company. What have you noticed about how OTT UIX has varied over the last few years and evolved?
Yeah, I think we in the pre-brief we talked a little bit yesterday about how it's become more. There's kind of like standard user patterns emerging around how a search works on OTT, or how the home screen of an OTT app works, and what kind of capabilities and personalization options are kind of standard nowadays. Adding to what Tom was saying, we're definitely seeing more restraint from our customers as well in terms of the platforms that they want to be on. And there's much more of a kind of like a crawl, walk, run versus let's go to 0 to 100 in one day. So you see, if you're an entertainment brand, you probably want to be on Fire and Roku, and then you're going to look at maybe Apple, Android, or you kind of like you have the key platforms first, and then you're building it out according to your demographic and your target countries. And then in addition to that, there's a much stronger focus on analytics. There's a much stronger focus on am I reaching enough customers on these platforms? Am I engaging them? So do they watch a large amount of time? Are they returning? And am I monetizing them? Are my pieces of content getting them to hump over the paywall which pieces of content are they, or am I able on the free side to be able to monetize with enough advertisements, so I'm making money here. So those the kind of like there's definitely that same shift that Tom was mentioning. We're seeing that too, and it's from our perspective, it's a shift from like building a bunch of building the most features coming out of the RFP towards let's get it out there and then learn how we're reaching, engaging, monetizing those viewers, and then we built out according to that.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you in a second, Jeroen, because I've got a specific question for you about, actually for both of you, Tom, as well, about the specific functionality in OTT UIX. Arianna, from your experience, I mean, I know you're here with your Varnish hat on, but you used to be at Amazon and worked on Alexa, right? You were a tech evangelist for Alexa.
That's correct.
So voice control is a new, I can hear my Alexa shouting in the background. Yeah, I mentioned her name. Voice control is a different way to interface with UI and UX. I mean, are there any learnings that an audience can take from your experience?
Yeah, of course, and you are absolutely correct. That's just a new user experience and user interface we could leverage nowadays. So other than the usual touch screens or clicking on the keyboard or remote controls, nowadays we also have the voice, which is more natural. It is usually easier to handle and to adopt, because it's the easiest way we have to communicate one with another. And from an OTT standpoint, if we go through the different user interfaces and user experience we have, we also need to take into consideration that upon an improvement for the end user, we also have, with voice, we have also introduced an improvement for the underlying technology. I'll just give you an example, mostly because my background really is very, very technical. So when we want to deliver video, when we want to do live streaming, video is fairly expensive, especially when we deliver high bit rates. And the same goes for the user experience and the user interfaces, because as both my colleagues mentioned, nowadays we have a lot of diversification, a lot of user personalization, and this in the long run becomes expensive, not in terms of money, but in terms of strategy, planning, resources, and everything you can think of. But when you take into consideration voice control, that immediately lower the entry level. Because when we need to deliver voice control and that voice control exchanges, we are actually delivering, in the end, that will be a file, a JSON file, and no more than that. So there is no real video delivery. There is no real diversification as you would consider that in any other standard user interface. So with voice, we are reducing the amount of load and the amount of stress we put on the underlying resources and on the technology stack we have to deliver user-specific content and user-specific recommendation and so on.
Yeah. Voice is a fascinating subject, which I suspect we're probably going to do a whole session on. You guys, Jeroen and Tom, are there any? I remember running a survey and looking at hundreds of different OTT services and actually counting the functions in each service. I used to call it the view.
Oh, you were the problem.
Because it was. Having done so this is in 2012, I remember looking at a whole bunch of different OTT services and realizing that they were all built from a common toolkit, right, of functions and features. And objectively, you could almost, as you say, Tom, tick boxes against each other and say, right, this is the most feature-rich OTT service, but that didn't necessarily make it the best service. Yeah. So from an OTT UIX perspective now, are there any functions that absolutely you must have versus what are the sort of nice to haves. Yeah, I'm thinking of something like even BBC iPlayer, which on iPad there's no 10-second plus, 10-second back. Yeah, which just seems so standard. Is that just me that likes that, or is that really a necessary thing there? Tom?
So yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to dodge it in some ways. That specific question.
Yeah.
I would say that the main challenge that a lot of our we encounter a lot with customers who have not properly considered their particular audience and their particular content. So the key to that is the answer is, yeah, there are absolutely features that will be make the difference for your user, but it depends on what content you have, what behavior you're trying to encourage with users, and who your users are, and where and how they watch. So that's and that is changing all the time, because people's expectations are changing all the time. So when people come to your service, they depending on who they are and what your service is, they will have a certain expectation of what you are going to deliver to them, and if you don't deliver to that expectation, then they will be disappointed. And so there are features that now we see as completely standard, like autoplay, which I remember 3 or 4 years ago having debates with clients about whether or not that was the right thing to put into a product, and that is the constant evolution of user experience. So one of the challenges we've had over the past 5 or 6 years is that there have been a lot of white label solutions in the market. And the thing about a white label is that people are trying to persuade you that the user experience for kind of video products is kind of done. It's like, we've built this thing, it kind of encapsulates all the possible user experiences you could need, and we're trying to sell it, and we don't want people to come and change it because we're trying to sell a standard experience. And it is, as long as people are people, their expectations and technology will move on, and therefore so will the user experience need to. And I think the biggest challenge that people who are building from scratch have is that they need to try and build an underlying infrastructure that allows you to be able to evolve. Over the last 5 years, I think a lot of people have moved from engagements with vendors that are very restrictive, but get them onto lots of platforms, to slowly transitioning to being like, oh, actually, what we need to have a little bit more control. 80% of what we do might be standard. As Jeroen was saying, there are certain things now which are expected. Search should work. You just expect it to work. The player has certain features about it that you just expect to happen. But then there are maybe 20% of the customer experience which should be very specific to you. And if you can't have that flexibility and implement that specific user experience, then you're going to probably be a disadvantage to those who can.
Jeroen, we talked about exactly what Tom just said in relation to Quibi yesterday.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think if the business model aside, they're having they're figuring it out, but their user experience, that fits that fairly unique proposition of and short form high quality entertainment on mobile. It's very, very well thought out and very strong. I love just the overall UI of the app, the capabilities that they have in there. They also, like Disney, have gone out with a fairly clean user interface. To what Tom was saying, not like 5 years ago, we have to have everything in the kitchen sink, all the bells and whistles. No, let's just build the capabilities that we know our audiences need and figure it out, extend from there. And then this, I love their the ability, that kind of ability to flip between horizontal and vertical video. It just makes so much sense in a world where we know from our data, most of mobile viewers are not going to flip their phone around. It's too much work. They're not interested in doing that, or they're they're watching a video while they're also reading the article or scrolling through the comments of the video, those kind of things. So having such a clean, beautiful solution for vertical or horizontal video, that was very impressive.
Which way do mobile users like it? Portrait or landscape?
Oh, portrait all the time. Yeah, portrait all the time. Maybe if you're on a couch and you want to watch a 2-hour movie, you're flipping it to landscape. But if you're watching short form content, or there's any kind of engagement with the videos, think about Twitch, where there's the comments and those kind of things. You're going to have it in portrait.
Yeah. And I think that's increasing, because maybe a few years ago people would flip more often because you needed to, because people weren't designing for portrait. But now with Instagram and TikTok and everyone else who's designing portrait experiences, it's now as I was saying before, like the user expectation is, you provide me with a portrait experience because that's how I want to look at it. And if you don't, then you're swimming against the tide in a way.
Yeah. And the phones can't be wider anymore because they won't fit our hands, so they become taller and taller and taller over time. So that means that your standard widescreen 16:9 video is an ever shrinking chunk of that display if you're only in 16:9, which means you're at very disadvantaged if you're targeting mobile experiences.
Arianna, we talked about this earlier as well, and I was suggesting, or at least putting out the question, which everybody's thought of already, which is that, look, we talk about UI/UX, and it is undoubtedly important, especially the experience part of the UI/UX. But actually, when it comes to your favorite OTT services, are you really going to stop using an OTT service because the UI/UX is shit? I mean, equally, turn it around. Are you really not going to subscribe to an OTT service because the user experience is not particularly good? In other words, is UI/UX sort of top heavy in consideration, and actually the value proposition is really about content versus cost from a consumer perspective?
So I think that as balance is the answer here. So we need to have, or users expect to have, a good and easy to use and adopt user interface, but at the same time, the quality of the content provided should be good enough. I'll give you an example. If we go back to not even that far back in the past, but let's say 4 or 5 years ago, when you wanted to watch a movie or a video, you could wait and expect some buffering, and that was okay. That was accepted because that was the experience back then. But nowadays, as soon as you get into a buffering situation, either you start reloading the page or you just drop it. That's not acceptable anymore. So the expectations from the user have grown, and they do expect, or we all really expect, and higher quality, both in terms of content and in terms of user experience. And specifically, if you think about user interface and user experience, that is all about perception. Like an average nowadays, a regular website or regular page, OTT page and video delivery and video content page will take roughly about in between 2 and 5 seconds to completely load. But the user would expect to have some sort of a content displayed before the 2 seconds, so that the user needs to be able to perceive that he or she can move forward with experience. So that's all about it. That's a kind of test I will suggest my prospects, customers, or anyone else willing to build an OTT from scratch to run. Just test how it feels. If it feels good, if it feels like you are moving forward with experience and that you have content you can go through and review, then in the end, that will be a good user experience or a good starting point to start improving your pipeline. Don't necessarily try to force and have everything perfect after the very first time you try to build an OTT. Things can be improved over time. But I'd say the minimum valuable product you need to have needs to have some sort of a good user experience and user perception, really, and some good content as well. No one wants to see buffering anymore. So rather try to serve a lower bit rate instead of providing 4K content. Just provide the usual 180 content.
So just to round that off then, and I'm conscious, by the way, that we've already been talking 25 minutes and we've only focused on UIX, which is no bad thing. That's okay, because it is an important chunk of front end. Just to round this UIX bit off then, Jeroen, I didn't ask you exactly the same question I asked Tom about need to have functionality versus nice to have. But actually, if we park that for a moment, is it then true to say that it doesn't matter about the need to have versus nice to have? It's more like what Arianna says about needing to have low latency, for example, needing to make sure that the system is robust enough to start playing video and continuously play video stably over a period of time. Is that much more important than, whether you've got a 10 seconds plus or minus feature?
Yeah, I think that just stability of service, performance of service is very important. Yeah, that's it's the issue is it's not important until it is. It's not important until you hit some sort of issue or spike, and then all of a sudden it's the most important thing in the world. But you're too late. So your live stream has dropped, and all your soccer match players are looking at a black screen. So yes, speed is an aspect, redundancy is an aspect there, security is an aspect there. Those things could, they're already part of they're tangential to UX or part of UX because they really dictate UX in a way as well. But yeah, those are things you have to be have to have in order versus features. You cannot go the path of let's build a bunch of features and then fix the service as it goes down. That's really hard to retain your viewers as they experience that, versus just have a lightweight service that's performing very fast, and then you can field requests from your end viewers around the 10 minus buttons or Chromecast support or whatever that kind of added capabilities can be. Starting lean, but your performance oriented is the best way to go.
You can tell that the whole plus 10 minus thing is a really big deal for me. We are going to be talking about the future of BBC iPlayer soon, now that Tim Davie has been appointed the new Director General and started his new job this week. And that's one of the things I'm going to be pressing for the BBC iPlayer to have. Can I ask you actually, just for a moment, each of you as well, to think of your favorite OTT service? I'll ask you that in a second. In the meantime, audience members, we've already been talking for half an hour. I am going to hold all the questions because I usually do, but if you have questions, then please do put them in the Q&A window at the bottom or the chat window. Tom, your favorite OTT service? Quick fire round.
I mean, this is going to sound it's not really an OTT service, but I like YouTube. I think it's because it suits my needs in terms of I've got 3 young kids and I'm quite busy, and I get 15 minutes every now and again where I can watch something. And I know that on YouTube I have multiple channels that I follow that have 15 minutes or so long things that are really good to watch, so I know that I can go there and get what I need. I think from a life impacting perspective, probably Netflix, but not because I watch it, but because the kids watch it. Particularly during lockdown, where sometimes I need the kids to be in front of something for an hour, I know I can trust it to keep them entertained for an hour. So it's that for that reason, Netflix is also a good one.
Yeah, Arianna, do you have one?
I'm going with the obvious answer. That would be Netflix. I have user experience is really, really good, and it is simple to use. I have never ever seen the buffering word, not even on horrible connections. And I personally prefer TV series over movies. They take less of my time, and I can decide when to stop them, and I can check the trailers. Although I have to admit, Instagram is pushing video a lot. And that's just for distraction when you are waiting outside or you're in line somewhere. That's good to watch. So quality is good there as well, like small short videos straight to the point, and recommendation is usually good. Sometimes it's not perfect, but I'm sure they will refine that over the time. So yeah.
Okay, and your own?
I think mine is Disney. I think that they've been able to do so many things well, and you just start from the get-go with such a clean, lean yet very strong service that has everything that has all the kind of key things that you would need.
Yeah.
And now it's really interesting to see them spearhead changes. Their Hamilton, launching Hamilton on Disney was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now they're doing this Mulan, $22 or whatever. You're kind of like they're just I don't know, killing cinema. It might be a bit dramatic, but they're like it's pretty impressive what they're pulling off there with that service.
And Black Widow is coming up as well, right?
Yeah, that one too. Yeah. That's going to be another one.
Yeah. Okay. As I said, I'm conscious that we've already been talking for 35 minutes now about UI/UX. So we're going to try and get through some of these other bullet points semi-quickly. Arianna, content distribution. We talked about costs. Yeah. Are you able to give us any indication of this? And I mention this from a perspective that, I mean, my first video on demand job was getting live and catch up horse racing on the internet. And I remember spending around 3 days doing a spreadsheet of how much it would cost, depending on how successful the service was, how much additional bandwidth would we need from Akamai. Yeah, and the more streams we served, how much more bandwidth would we need, and therefore how much would we be paying extra? Because with Akamai, it was a stratified pricing structure. The more data you use, the cheaper each megabyte became. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. And
so,
I think, sorry.
Go on, sorry, go for it.
No, I still believe that's still very much true. Most of the commercial CDNs still have this business structure. So the more you consume, the more you pay until you reach some sort of flat rate when you are delivering petabytes of content per second. And then, of course, there you can negotiate the price. But in general, really, the more bandwidth you need, the more expensive it will be. The more content you have, and nowadays this is a big problem because we are not delivering 720 pixel videos. We are delivering 4K, we are delivering 16K videos, and the higher the bit rate is, the more storage you need. So you will need to have physical servers somewhere where you store the content, and that's expensive as well. So the trend I've seen with the commercial CDN is that they will adjust them. The prices will be adjusted depending on the storage you require, the storage you use, and the bandwidth you consume. And of course, if you have very specific needs, for example, think about, we were talking about this football or soccer game just happening in the UK. So if you suddenly have a spike with the bandwidth, that will be very, very expensive and unpredictable as well. Because especially for live content, it is very difficult to predict how many viewers you will have and on which devices they will be, and the bit rates they will be requesting, and so on and so forth. So I've seen, in my experience, at some point it becomes cheaper to go to an internet provider and just ask them, okay, those are our requirements. We need this amount of bandwidth. We need this amount of servers or storage. Can we negotiate the price instead of relying on a third-party service? Or the same reasoning goes for cloud providers. Cloud is good, cloud is great, and it helps everyone to scale the business up and down depending on specific periods where we expect more traffic or when we expect more users. But in the long run, or if anyone is planning to build an OTT platform on the cloud, I would advise to do the math properly, because nowadays it could be really cheap, but as soon as you grow over time, and with grow I mean both your the number of users and viewers you will have, but also the content you plan to deliver, that will suddenly become extremely expensive. Like video on demand libraries, they will just grow over time. There is no way you can reduce the amount of video you need to serve. That will just grow. Quality and bit rate, they will improve over time.
Okay, thanks for that, Arianna. Let's pivot to then quickly from content distribution to content recommendation. Your own JW Player has a content recommendation engine built into it. Tom, you've worked with, I guess, lots and lots of different content recommendation systems. Can we have a quick discussion about the different philosophies of content recommendation? So I was sort of counting this in my head earlier, and Tom in our conversation too. The BBC uses a sort of hybrid model, right, which is part algorithm, part human curation. Yeah, so let's call that hybrid. We've then got collaborative filtering, which uses content-based filtering, which uses tags, right? So it says crime, drama, mystery, suspense, that kind of thing. Then we've got collaborative filtering, which is like the Amazon shopping model. If you bought this, 99 people who bought this also bought that. Yeah, and then we have, so that's 3. What are the others? There's social networks as well, Tom, right?
Yeah, those have been used in the past to mixed results, I think. I mean, my general view is that we've always had a preference for there being some human element to curation, but it does largely depend on what is your relationship with the content. So, like we initially worked a lot with broadcasters. Broadcasters' job is to take content and own it. Make people want to watch it because they have a limited content catalog and they have a brand and an editorial relationship with that content. So they should be making people. You're creating relevance to your content so that people will watch it. Whereas an aggregator like a platform like Sky potentially, or someone who's got a lot of different content sources and is selling that to people, your job is to make people able to access the breadth and depth of your content as effectively as possible, so that they don't feel like they have a limited content selection. And in some ways, you don't want to be overly preferential towards one set of content over another. So your job of what your recommendations has to do is very different. So but yeah, I mean we have built a headless CMS that we use with a lot of our customers, where we're putting data into the CMS itself to allow editors to make better decisions about how they curate. And I think that combination is a really good one, because you're basically saying, okay, human decision making is still can add the magic to content that maybe an algorithm can't. But a human on their own without any data helping them is going to really struggle, because content catalogs get bigger and bigger and bigger. So some sort of hybrid there is often effective.
Your own, that becomes particularly important when you're looking at live content and other use cases like sports, for example.
Yeah. I think to echo Tom, I think it's a hybrid model as for recommendation is relevant. There's pieces of content that you want to push, or you're seeing maybe hidden gems in your library, and you look at your analytics. There's a video only has 10 views, but everybody's watching it completely through completion and all the way to the end. So let's push that in a a more curated shelf. And then on the other side of the fence, you do want to have you don't want to re-recommend the same videos to the person that has just watched that stuff. So there's also algorithmic work needed to be able to, especially if you go into the dungeons of an OTT app, how you're digging into the sub category, and you're finding more sci-fi movies like this one. That's just that's the kind of stuff that's very good for algorithms, and it's not going to be viable for humans to be kind of populating all these different flavors.
Yeah. Interestingly, that phrase that you use, hidden gems, I've seen that on 3 different OTT services in the last week, on Now TV, on Amazon, and on Netflix as well. It's like suddenly they've discovered this language.
I think it's more like everyone's been sitting at home for 5 months watching our entire catalogue, and now we have to try and get them to watch more.
Well, that's the other thing about Netflix, interestingly, that it has a whole, what do you call it, Tom? A carousel?
Yeah,
available, that's a watch it again, and I'm looking at my Netflix going, I did not watch that.
They're tricking you into watching something for the first time. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn from. So we've done work with Sky in the past, and they have a term called shouldering, which basically is you've just watched a 3-hour movie, and you still want to watch something else. Don't recommend them a 3-hour movie. It's a scheduling thing that people have done on linear TV for years and years, which is like, if you've just watched a really heavy, intense movie that's 3 hours long, put a short piece of comedy or like something light afterwards, because it's unlikely that someone's going to want to back-to-back 6 hours worth of like heavy war movies or whatever. So there is a something that an algorithm will do, which would you just watch this, so maybe you want to watch this. That needs quite a bit of intelligence in it to make it circumstantially relevant to someone.
Content recommendation, Arianna, of course, is based on metadata, right? So can we just quickly explore the different types of metadata? So again, just sort of off the top of my head, I can think of technical metadata, editorial metadata, then there's sort of file metadata, as well, related to the actual file itself. Are there others?
Not that I can think of, and from content delivery point of view, it doesn't really make that much difference. It's more about, that's a very interesting topic, because I think that's where we cross the line between front end and back end. Because of course we have variations of the same content to be provided to different users depending on their on whatever they have watched so far. At the same time, this whole logic lives on the back end. And then in between front end and the back end, we have the whole content delivery pipeline, whose goal is to do the magic and make sure that whatever content or metadata is requested could be then delivered to the end user. So in there we have a lot of variations and diversification, which we need to take into account when we do content delivery, because it must be valid and available all the time. So whenever building an OTT system, I'm absolutely fine with user personalization, but that needs to be taken into account seriously. So perhaps instead of wanting to have a super granular system where you do personalization on a user basis, perhaps you want to create groups. So I'm not sure. People living in Italy, of course, we do prefer to watch movies in Italian. So there is no way Netflix will ever suggest me to watch something in English. Or I'm not sure if you are a fan of or who said the 3-hour long war movie. If you're a fan of those long movies, perhaps you want to make sure that this person, or we want to make sure that we are caching and delivering the same recommendation to a group of different to to a group including different users.
Yeah.
And this will oversimplify the setup. And then with the time, things can be improved, of course, and granularity can be introduced, but granularity is, again, that's expensive from a strategic point of view and from a bandwidth and a hardware point of view as well. So that's something that should come in phase 2 or phase 3 of a project and OTT platform.
There's a sentence you said at the beginning of that, which is that metadata is a very interesting subject, and there are a whole bunch of geeks out there who are cheering you on. Yeah, when you say that.
I have a particular bugbear about metadata and data generally. Like, I think as product, we've built a lot of products over the years, and one of the challenges, and I'm sure your own, from historically, the way that the workflow for video worked was kind of OVPs would provide video with metadata, and that metadata was often something you had to work with. And when we're trying to create interesting experiences or meaningful experiences on the front end, there is often a lot of data that exists that we need to then bring in from a separate source and try and bring together with the video to create those meaningful experiences. And that is often been one of our biggest challenges, is that an OVP will provide us basic metadata. It's not really very easy to change it in circumstances to make it relevant to different people. It's often accompanied by tags, which is a really simple and overly simplified way of tying content to content. And so the work that we always have to do in the background to try and make that mean something is really, really a lot. So yeah, I think, and that, sport, whether it's sport or other topics, news and stuff like that, there's always way more data points that have very intricate relationships with each other. If you want to create a meaningful user experience, you have to try and find a way of bringing that together with the metadata in the video, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah. We've got 3 questions from the audience, which I'm going to just crack on with straight away. So, from an anonymous attendee, what is the tech stack you recommend for building UI UX? Your own?
Ooh, yeah. On which
question? What is the?
Good. I was like, dodge that one.
Yeah, I mean, on which platforms? Huh? I think that's the first. I think that's the first question. What content do you have? What demographics are you looking for, both in terms of age, gender, and as well as what countries? And then you pick your platforms. Is it web? Is it Android, iOS? Is it Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, or whatever the platforms are? That's the first. That's from a front end stack perspective. That's the first thing you have to pick.
Yes.
I would say if they want to ask that question, then drop us an email with more specifics in it, and we can give a more specific answer. Yeah,
Tom at osmodern.co.uk for if you want to get in touch with Tom. There's a question from Stephen Osterkamp. For UGC, for user-generated content, is it good to ask the user to create metadata? Does that work well?
I don't think this will scale. I don't think this will scale easily. You can ask the user to create the metadata, but then you will need to make sure to filter on that.
Well, I mean, isn't it the case though that, for example, when I upload this video after we finished today, I'll upload it to YouTube and I'll enter a description of that video, and that description is metadata, right?
Yes.
I think you need to have a highly motivated user to do that. I think I would say in general OTT terms, passive work by users is much more effective than active. So the biggest commitment that someone can make, you can expect someone to make, is watching your video. And if they watch it in this section, but they don't watch these sections, they're telling you something about your video, and you can learn from that. And there are lots of tools and things in the market now that mean that analyzing people's passive behavior can teach you what you need to know about your video. You probably need someone to help you understand it if you've never done it before, but you can learn a lot just from watching what people do. The minute you start asking people to kind of write stuff or, do click something that isn't just a play button, then you're probably asking a lot from people.
Yeah, I would second to that. I think that the exciting metadata that you're getting from the users is that you're just their behavior, whether whether it is their like sequence in which they watch videos, that which tells you essentially it's your crowdsourced recommendation algorithm. Right? If you can just mine those sequences of videos, that's how your large recommendations algorithms tend to work in general. Replay behavior of viewers, for us, very interesting to figure out what highlights are in content for automatically building little previews or clips of sports events. So there's a lot of data that's, or how many people are dropping off on the in the middle of an ad. Well, you have to, or not. So we can amp up or reduce the ad load. That data is very interesting and probably well, probably we've done some testing, but it's more so than like thumbs up, thumbs down style, required action, required metadata.
And Jeroen, you talked about this at the beginning, analytics. Alas, we've run out of time today now, but we will do a separate session on analytics because there's a lot to talk about there too. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Jeroen Waring from JW Player, to Tom Williams from Ostmodern, and to Ariana Ondeo from Varnish. And thank you to you guys in the audience for your questions too. Next week, as I said, I think we are almost certainly going to be talking about the future of BBC iPlayer, and that's because the BBC had a new Director General starting this week, Tim Davie. Not that he's necessarily going to be watching this and taking notes, from next week's session, but I think it's just a good session to have to talk about the future of iPlayer because there hasn't changed much lately. Thank you for joining me. Hope you can join me next week. The video of this session will be available on the VodPro website on Monday. Thank you very much.